Could the key to a greener future lie in not who's richest or most advanced, but in who leads the charge towards sustainable energy? Well, China, a global powerhouse famous for its fast growth and big industries, is now diving into green energy. But what's their secret and how are they outpacing everyone else? Well, first off, let's talk about what happened in April 2024. The US Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, took a trip to China and had some strong words about their economic policies. She warned China's leaders that their massive industrial capacity is seen by the West, especially the US and Europe, as a big risk. One major concern? China's recent trend of making high-quality electric cars and selling them at prices regular people can afford. This has caused quite a stir in places like the UK, where the government thinks it's not just fair play. In France and Germany, the fear of cheap Chinese cars flooding their markets has already made legacy automakers really worried. It ain't just cars. China is also making a lot of solar panels, wind turbines and batteries, which worries people in the West. Some think China is becoming a big problem that needs to be dealt with. So maybe it's time we think about that, right? Well, here's the thing. China has promised to reach net zero emissions by 2060. About 15 years ago, Chinese leaders realised that cutting carbon emissions wasn't just a global goal, it was crucial for improving air quality and public health in their rapidly growing cities. They also knew that economic growth wouldn't be helped by making internal combustion engine vehicles, which could struggle to compete with established global brands and would keep China depending on excessive oil imports. So they decided to dive into developing battery-powered electric vehicles, EVs. Meanwhile in the West, even with Tesla showing the way, major car manufacturers stuck to old technology they were familiar with. As a result, China gained the first mover advantage over its Western competition. According to EV volumes, of the 14 million electric vehicles sold globally in 2023, around 8.5 million were sold in China. 70% of those were fully electric and 30% were plug-in hybrids. China is also transforming other transportation too. Michael Bernard, a global technologist who advises companies and policymakers, says they're electrifying everything much faster than the rest of the world combined. Yeah, he's not wrong. China alone has 1.2 million electric trucks and buses on the roads and 43,000 kilometres of high-speed electric rail, reducing the need for aviation. By 2022, 27% of buses in China had some kind of electric propulsion, with 84% being purely electric. This is a huge leap considering that in 2015, almost 80% of Chinese urban buses ran on diesel or gas. According to the World Resources Institute, if China continues on this path, its greenhouse gas emissions from road transport will peak before 2030, ahead of the EU and the USA. Now, having perfected their electric vehicle production, Chinese automakers are aiming for global expansion. Chinese brands are already common in Australia and Southeast Asia, and they're now moving into Europe and eyeing into the US, causing quite a bit of concern among competitors. But that's not all. Let's break down what's really happening with China's dominance in the electric vehicle and green energy sector. At the IAA Mobility Auto Show in Munich, Germany, in September 2023, Renault's CEO Luca de Meo acknowledged China's lead in electric cars, calling them a generation ahead and stressing the need for other companies to catch up quickly. Over in the United States, Jim Farley, CEO of Ford Motor Company, also had something noteworthy to say. He warned, if you cannot compete fair and square with the Chinese around the world, then 20% to 30% of your revenue is at risk over the next several years. These comments highlighted the growing dominance of Chinese EVs and the pressure they are putting on global competitors. But one of the biggest criticisms of Chinese EVs is their pricing. Many claim they're artificially cheap due to hefty state subsidies. But how true is that? According to a recent analysis, incentives indeed exist for both Chinese producers and consumers. For example, EV buyers in China don't have to pay any vehicle purchase tax. Additionally, Chinese automakers have received production subsidies over the last decade to encourage them to prioritise EVs over traditional internal combustion engine vehicles. Additionally, Chinese firms often benefit from discounted land prices, low interest loans and research grants from local governments keen to attract industry and jobs. In response, the United States has rolled out its own suite of incentives for domestic manufacturers through the Inflation Reduction Act and has applied a 28% tariff on Chinese EV imports. But according to a recent report, the US government is also putting significant pressure on Mexico to prevent Chinese suppliers from setting up production facilities there to take advantage of the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. Meanwhile, in Europe, the European Union launched a formal investigation into Chinese subsidies in September 2023, claiming that dumping unfairly cheap EVs in foreign markets violates international trade rules and disrupts the free market. So, how exactly is China subsidising its green tech today? They've got an industrial policy that led to producing cheap but essential products by planning for future needs. China's focus on clean energy includes wind turbines, solar panels, high voltage direct current, batteries, heat pumps, electric trucks and trains. They benefit from huge economies of scale thanks to strategies from the 1980s and 1990s. Their domestic supply chains are very short because they create industrial clusters. For instance, one district in one city makes a third of all electric bicycles in China. This concentrated production means their money goes much further than it would in the US or Europe. Even though wages in China are rising, their production remains super efficient. If they need a part, it's right next door. Small firms can team up to fulfill big orders quickly. In contrast, Europe and the US have lost focus on industrial policies, thinking innovation was just about startups and research. But why should we bother reducing our emissions in the West when China, widely seen as the top global polluter, continues to increase its coal use every year? Well, according to Global Energy Monitor, GEM, China currently operates over 1,100 gigawatts of coal power capacity, more than the combined capacity of the next 9 largest coal-burning countries. They're also planning to add 268 gigawatts more, with 136 gigawatts already under construction. This massive capacity makes China the world's leading emitter of greenhouse gases. However, GEM also reports that China has shelved, retired, mothballed or cancelled 775 gigawatts of coal capacity based on older, less efficient technology burning dirtier forms of coal. The outdated plants emit around 1.4 tonnes of carbon dioxide per megawatt hour, while newer, more efficient facilities emit about 0.8 tonnes, a significant reduction of over 40%. Now, China acknowledges its role in climate change and aims for energy independence. They focused on lifting millions out of poverty. As their domestic demand for coal and energy stabilises, they're also improving operational efficiency in their coal plants. These plants are used mainly during peak demand, with renewable and low-carbon sources prioritised first. New regulations mandate that all new coal-fired plants must be capable of reducing their output to 30% during low-demand periods, supported by state subsidies to maintain stability while renewable energy capacity expands. China's expansion in renewables is happening at a rapid pace. New coal power plants in China might survive for a couple of decades, but many will eventually become stranded assets, and their owners will exit the market at a loss. Despite criticisms and challenges, China's trajectory towards a greener future is undeniable. The country's ambitious plans and rapid execution in renewable energy and EV sectors illustrates its determination to lead in the next phase of global industrial evolution. Their long-term planning and investments are paying off, making them a formidable leader in the green energy race. Now, what do you think? Do you believe other countries can catch up to China in the green energy race? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and also subscribe to our channel for more.